Hello, everybody. So, in this video, we're going to be going over hearing and balance. We've gone over vision, smell, and taste, and now we're going to get into the final two special senses here for hearing and balance. So, we're going to look at the structures responsible for hearing and balance, and then we're going to look at how these both use something known as mechanoreception. So mechanoreception is when we mechanically move something and it causes a signal to be sent. There's little channels that are pretty much connected to the little hairs that move. So when I'm talking right now, I'm speaking sound waves. Sound waves are coming into your ear, causing little hairs to vibrate. And those vibrations, well, it causes this little membrane to vibrate. And the vibration of that membrane deflects little hairs, which opens ion channels, sends signals down your cochlear nerve, which becomes your vestibular cochlear nerve, to your to your thalamus and to your temporal lobe, and that's how you're listening to me right now. And then other regions of your brain, such as the Wernicke's area, is then putting meaning to the words that I'm speaking. So here we have our general representation of the ear. So you have the ear auricle. So the sound wave comes in and goes through the ear canal or the external acoustic meatus right here. The sound wave vibrates something known as your eardrum or your tympanic membrane. So this is all considered external ear right there. Next up, we have the middle ear. The middle ear or is the tympanic cavity. In here you have your three little inner ear bones, the malleus, the incus, and the stapes, also known as the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. So the mallet or the malleus hits the incus or the anvil and then sends that signal to the stirrup. So a stirrup is like what you put your foot in for when you're riding a horse. And so it looks like that and connects to something called the oval window. So long story short, what happens is this membrane here vibrates when a sound wave hits it, causes these little ear bones to then send the signal into the inner ear. This tube right here is called the eustachian tube, or also known as the pharyngotympanic tube. It connects down to the pharynx. So if we've ever been on a plane or been in a car going up a mountain or anything where elevation changes, sometimes your ear pops. That's because you create a pressure difference between the middle ear and the external ear. And typically this tube is open, but when you're in that higher pressure, the tube is sealed. But then when you swallow, that tube temporarily opens and that pop sound causes the pressures to equalize. So if there's an unequal pressure between the external and middle ear, usually sounds a little distorted as a result. But then we enter the inner ear. In the inner ear is where we send that sound wave now through a little snail spiral looking structure called the cochlea. The cochlea is where hearing takes place. And this shows it being pretty large, but it's about the size of a pea. That's where all hearing takes place. And this is all embedded in like the bone of the skull too. So very, very hard to get in there and fix anything. And then over here we have the vestibule, and along with that we have what are known as the semicircular canals. There'd be one more over there. The semicircular canals are where when you're spinning, that's where balance is taking place. And inside the vestibule here, that's where your head forward and head back. That's where that sort of balance. So here we're talking about hearing and balance. So we'll get to these structures over here when we talk about hearing and balance. And then when the signal gets sent out, the cochlear nerve and the vestibular nerve connect or combine, not really connect, they just fuse into one, called the vestibular cochlear nerve. But that's the general overview of the anatomy of the ear for audition, which is hearing. So your primary auditory cortex is where hearing takes place. So I kind of just went over how hearing moves through. So here, sound moves as a wave. You're hearing me. I'm speaking at a certain wavelength. So wavelengths, just like we talked about for vision, is peak to peak. If I go higher in wavelength, so right now I have a pretty deep voice, so I have a pretty low wavelength. A higher wavelength is a higher pitch sound. So so more of a ringing sort of sound. So, you got your low tones and your high tones. If you play all the keys on the piano, you got your deep tones and then your deep, deep, deep tones. So the deep, deep, deep ones are a very, very high wavelength, higher energy. Now, that's measured in hertz. For sound, we measure that in hertz. For loudness, we measure that in decibels. So when something becomes more loud, all that particularly means is you have a bigger wavelength. It's a higher amplitude of that wavelength equates to a higher sound. And you're able to interpret this sound, and you have some special protective mechanisms in case something does hurt that. So the wave moves through, rumbles the tympanic membrane that then sends a signal into the cochlea. So what's actually happening in the cochlea? Well, you have this structure called the organ of Corti in the basilar membrane. So as this sound wave moves through, this basilar membrane changes its stiffness. So at the start, it's pretty loose, and then as it gets further down to the end, so as you wrap around, so right here's the start, and then you wrap around the snail. At the end is where the fibers are less sensitive, so you can activate them easier. So the initial ones here are the ones that are more prone to damage. So as we get older, typically the hearing of higher frequencies, like you could blow those whistles that kids can hear but adults can't hear because we've damaged the hair cells. But what happens is once they get to a region of that basilar membrane that they can vibrate, the sound wave moves through and causes it to vibrate, and then that sends the signal to your brain. We'll talk about that more when we get to here. So this is what that snail shell looks like. So we have all these scalas in here. So the scala vestibuli, we got the cochlear duct, and then the scala tympani. And then right here's that basilar membrane we just talked about. So as sound waves move through, so up here as sound waves move through, the scala vestibuli, so they're moving through this part right here, they end up causing a vibration of the basilar membrane, which is down here. Now, if we zoom in to this region, we can see what's going on there in the organ of Corti then. So here again, zooming into that region right there. So down here's basilar membrane. When that vibrates, that causes this structure to move. The movement of that structure moves these stereocilia connected to this membrane here called the tectorial membrane. So they're connected. So imagine this bottom structure moving side to side. And if this all moves that way, say a sound wave hits it, these all deflect that way and then open up ion channels. And then that sends the sound through. So pretty neat how that works. There are also some inner hair cells here, and these can increase in tightness if there's a really loud sound trying to protect those outer hair cells. If you destroy these outer hair stereocilia, that hearing is lost at that range, unfortunately. So here, if you unravel the cochlea, like I said, the start of it, it takes a very high frequency in order to vibrate those hair cells. Here, a medium frequency, and here would be a very low, deep frequency. Sorry, my little dog is chasing its tail right now. Ziggy, be good. And so if it doesn't vibrate anything, it'll just pass all the way through and then come out what's known as the round window, and it doesn't affect anything. You just don't hear anything there. So that's hearing in a nutshell. So any damage to this, any damage to the tympanic membrane, any internal inflammation. So whenever you hear loud music for a long time, it's because there's some inflammation that has taken place in that ear, and you're getting a little bit of tinnitus. So tinnitus is that ringing sound that you get in your ear after hearing loud music. So listening to loud music, listening to loud noises, being around loud noises and workshops and things like that. I know we're all young, but wear your ear protection because it will help you with age for your hearing. All right, so that's how hearing works. Very, very, I know, a little complex, but all it comes down to is that sound wave moving the hair, causing an action potential, and it's mechanically gated channel. Next up is equilibrium, also mechanically gated. So we have two types of ways to analyze our equilibrium. We have one, our forward and reverse. So your head going down, your head straight up, or your head back. And then we have spinning. So there are two structures that handle that. So right here in the vestibule, we have the utricle and the saccule. So there are two parts here where we have what are known as the maculae. The maculae here are known as our little ear stones. So here, these are these calcium carbonate. They're almost like shells in our ear, so known as otoliths. Um, and so we call them ear stones, and they kind of embed themselves within these hair cells, these stereocilia right here. So when your head is upright, you got the pressure pushing down. When you put your head forward, these stones fall forward, causing a deflection of these hair cells and an increase in rate of action potentials firing from those cells. And then your brain is informed that your head is forward. That's why if your eyes are closed, you put your head forward, you know where your head is in space. Whereas when the hair cells are right here, there's a steady state of action potentials being sent. If you were to put your head back the other way, so going backwards, this state rate of action potentials would actually slow down, and your brain would be able to interpret that of where your head is in space. So pretty neat how that works for these macula that are found in our vestibule of the ear. And now we get to rotational movement. So rotation, if you start spinning, why when you spin and you stop spinning, do you get dizzy? So that deals with the semicircular canal. So they're in the XYZ coordinate plane. So here there's one going each direction. Hard to show that in 3D. Inside, there's a fluid called the endolymph. So there's a fluid inside this here. And then there's this little tongue structure called the cupula, or the ampulla is also another term for it. And as fluid moves through, so if you start rotating your head, fluid moves through and causes a deflection of that little tongue. And then down here you have stereocilia, and then that sends an action potential. The thing is, when you start spinning, think what happens when you spin, you stop, the fluid doesn't stop right away. So the fluid keeps moving, and your vision is looking forward saying everything is done and fine. But that fluid is still moving and informing your brain that spinning is occurring. And that's when you get dizzy. So, like figure skaters, if you ever watch them when they're spinning really fast, they spot. They are looking at a spot trying to trick their brain that they're not spinning. And that is this mechanism to try to not to get dizzy in a way. So, kind of neat how they're able to trick the brain to not get as dizzy. Also, practice and training plays a big role there. There's a disorder called vertigo, if you've heard of it before. Vertigo is where these just start randomly firing. So your brain is like, oh, we're spinning. So the world just starts spinning and you're not spinning. So that's not good. Like if you're driving or something like that, you don't want that happening. So vertigo can be very, very debilitating if you can't get it under control or find the underlying reason for what's causing it. So any damage here, any damage to the cochlear nerve, to these hair cells, can lead to deafness. So very, very sensitive area here that you don't want to screw up and you want to take care of. Um, but yeah, that's oh, and then motion sickness. So why do you get motion sick? Well, motion sickness is caused by a confusion in the brain, pretty much. So let's say we're on a boat, the boat is rocking. We're inside the boat. Visually, everything is steady and stable. However, our joints are saying we're moving. The fluid in our ear says we're moving. So there's a mismatch between our vision, our joints' kinesthetic receptors, and our ear. And because of that, you get motion sickness. So they say the best way to treat motion sickness, besides taking a pill, anti-motion sickness, is to go stand and watch the horizon move. Hold on to the railing if you're on a boat, sit in the front seat of a car, and you get that movement of the horizon with the boat moving. And also, if you vomit out off the rail. But yeah, so motion sickness is due to a mismatch between all of that stuff going on, and your brain gets confused and you get sick from it. But yeah, that's all I have to talk about in this video here. So this will summarize, will finish all the special senses. very, very fun, very exciting to learn about how all of this works. I hope you enjoyed it. And like always, if you have questions, let me know. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And bye bye.